Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another review, guys. Yes, the first review of the year. Sorry it took a little bit of time. I was going through a little bit of a spell with sinus infection, drainage, season changing, winter climate problems, so on and so forth. But hopefully everything's okay. With that being said, it's time to dive into the review of Lost Soul Aside. This game has went through development hell like you would not believe. Although I wouldn't say it's development hell rivaling that to, like, say, Final Fantasy 15 per se, but more of a awkward shift per se. So for those that don't know, the original project for Lost Soul Aside originally was developed by a single person. I'll leave the name right here as I completely forget how the name is, but he developed what was looking like the Lost Soul Aside game, which looked fantastic at the time. Fast forward to a few years later, somehow Sony ends up having this weird thought ideal of buying him and his project straight up, and giving him a team in order to finish the game itself. Thus leading to a few years later and the game finally getting released as of last year. And then we had some problems, apparently. Apparently, as soon as the game came out, there were some issues with some bugs and glitches and stuff of the nature, along with a few technical issues in terms of gameplay and stuff. And whenever I heard all this stuff, I was like, I'm gonna hold back a little bit before I dive into it and kind of see how things goes. And from what it sounds like coming from other YouTubers, that Lost Soul Aside has some major updates, some updates that helped make the game better. Which is good, because that means that makes this game more of a redemption arc rather than a major disappointment after a long time of development. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, interesting. The development of this game went from a single person to a Sony exclusive development team, and then Sony straight up saying it will become a AAA title. And it's like, I don't know if that was a wise decision on their part, in all honesty. Because in all honesty, take away the AAA stat, the game's not bad, in all honesty. I feel like this game would do well as just being either a AA or an indie title. And really, that's basically the best way to look at it, is that this game is alright. There's nothing majorly wrong with it. Keep in mind, I didn't play it on day one. I played it literally right after Christmas. So whenever I was playing it, the updates and stuff like that they had added was already put into the game straight off the back. So as I was playing the game, I didn't really had any major issues or problems that the game had. Now obviously there were some people that said voice acting was a major issue, but coming from a person like myself, whose most favorite console is the PlayStation 2, and trust me, there's quite a few that feature some not so terrific voice act work, in all honesty it wasn't that bad. I feel like the voice acting wasn't that horrific. There might have been one case where the yell was a little bit off, but outside of that though, voice acting was not completely terrible. I felt it was alright. But now let's go on to the main subject of the game itself, and that is the gameplay. What is this game? Straightforward, Devil May Cry. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but it's just basically Devil May Cry. You know, you have the fact that you can switch between 4 different weapons as you go through the game. Obviously you start off with one, but then you eventually go through and collect 3 other weapons. You do eventually towards the end unlock a supposed devil trigger. It is not a devil trigger, but it might as well be at this point. And that's basically it. The gameplay is basically that. However though, the game did decide to take a few little privileges that ordinarily it never tried to do. The first thing that I noticed, and one that I abused a little bit, was the sword customization. Yes, you can take little random ornaments that you attain through the game and add them to your weapon. Now these ornaments do stat upgrades or stat boosts or stuff of that nature depending on what the ornament will do. However though, you can also adjust the size of the ornament and decorate your weapon however way you want to. I kid you not. The first thing I did was turn my sword into what looks like a Keyblade. I will be straight up with you on this one. I went Kingdom Hearts on it, and I'm like, okay, I like this. I like how they did this. It's one of those things where it's like, is it pointless? Yes. But is it cool and nice to see? Also, yes. I actually like this feature, and it's one thing that I'm surprised no one ever talks about, is the fact that you can decorate your weapon however way you choose. And the coolest thing is this as well, that even though there are several different elemental weapons, as well as different accessories and stuff like that, you can actually cosmetically change the looks of these things to where it makes it aesthetically pleasing to your desired design. So let's say, for example, you want to stick with the basic sword weapon. You don't want to have the elemental weapon, but you like how cool the elemental weapon looks like. Well, the coolest thing is that you can actually change the way these look in game. And it's like, there's this character that is your shopkeeper, obviously, and stuff like that. She does all of your like item customizations and stuff of the nature, as well as weapon customizations. She can change and morph the weapons to look to your pleasing. And I actually like this feature. I actually kind of like it. It's really cool, and it's something that you don't see a lot of where it's like, hey, here's a weapon, but you can decorate it in a way that you prefer the most. And sometimes it shows up in game. Like every once in a while, when you see Kaiser using the sword itself in the cutscene, it actually shows up in game, which is pretty cool. I actually like that. There's also the fact that it features costumes, but some of them are more of along the lines of like, to really cool looking to you know? Like you have armor variants, and those armor variants, while they do look cool, I wouldn't go as far as to say that I like them per se. I actually like using the one where it features Kaiser without the jacket, or the white variants versions, which honestly they look cool. And if you're like me, which I completely forgot that I had it, if you had the day one version of the game, it comes with the digital add-on content that you can download that features the original look that Kaiser would have looked like when it first showed in game trailers and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. Outside of the cosmetics though, what about the gameplay, aside from the fact that it's a Devil May Cry? How does it play? How does it feel? How do you feel about it? So on and so forth. Honestly, I don't have any major issues with the gameplay. I feel like they did what they could to make it the best that it could be, and in all honesty, it's just fine. It doesn't rival that of, like, say, Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, but it does well just to be on its own. In fact, really, in all honesty, the biggest thing that I actually liked about this was the amount of bosses that you actually fight. Now, I would say they're bosses, but you kind of feel which one's more of a main boss, and then what ends up being what looks like a sub-boss. And those sub-bosses surprisingly kind of rival that of the main ones. Like, there were some cases where I actually did fight a sub-boss like 3 or 4 times, depending on how you view them and stuff like that. But ultimately, some of them were actually pretty cool. And I actually liked how they format these bosses. These bosses, while yes, seem repetitive, they actually stand out on their own. They're actually really cool. And another cool feature that I had, after you play through the main campaign of the story, you can go back and play through these same chapters, which the chapter format, I'm a little bit weirded out. It seems to do like different parts. I'm not saying that it's bad, but it definitely is weirded out. Like, say for example, chapter 1 is comprised of like 3 parts, and it's weird how they did the chaptering of it. It's like chapter 3.1, 3.2, and so and stuff like that, and I'm like, huh? What? But chapter layout aside though, being able to select the difficulty after you beat through the main campaign was really cool, and I have to say it was actually really entertaining. I never really bothered to want to go for nightmare difficulty. I was like, I don't know if I want to fight the harder versions, but playing through the game on hard mode was actually pretty fun. It stands out really well in my personal opinion, and you do eventually get better weapons, better materials, and better gear. So it levels itself out a little bit as you continue to progress through the game. So it's like, okay, so it still levels this out in a way, but you still get to retain all of the weapons, all the abilities, and so on and so forth, to where you can enjoy the game at its fullest. Another thing, they also have their own little bloody palace, much like how Devil May Cry has. It has a thing where you fight against 100 rounds, and depending on however many rounds you fight, for example, every 10, 20, 30, you get platinum cards, which can be used to get cosmetic designs, from either having Kaiser dressed as a different look, to have Arena look a different color, to obviously the weapon accessories themselves and stuff. And really, in all honesty, this is actually all really cool. So really, it's hard to say if this game is mind-blowing. It's pretty good, and in my personal opinion, it does well for itself. It doesn't do anything explosively crazy except for obviously cosmetic design, like for example being able to customize a weapon however way you choose. But outside of that though, the game's not bad. So if you were to ask me right now, I would say this game's a 4 out of 5. It's not bad. It's fun, entertaining, and the longer you play it, the more enjoyable it can be for you. It depends on where your enjoyment comes from. If you wanted a challenging game, you're not going to get that right off the bat, sadly. Now, if you wanted to enjoy a good hack and slash time, something like that, a Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, you're going to get it in this game. This game is very fun and entertaining, the bosses are great, and the story is pretty engaging. In my personal opinion, it's well worth it. So if you were thinking about wanting to get Lost Soul aside, definitely pick it up. It's worth the purchase, and in my personal opinion, it was actually pretty fun. So, that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.